Okay, let's dive right into what's become an incredibly complex 100-day deadlock. Today in this explainer, we're breaking down the military, economic, and political forces that are completely stalling U.S.-Iran peace negotiations. You see, this isn't just a localized Middle Eastern conflict anymore. It's a massive, multi-front standoff that's rippling out to global markets and seriously shaking up domestic politics. Can you believe it's been exactly 100 days since Donald Trump launched military action against Iran? Right now, both sides are basically desperately circling each other. They're using everything from ballistic missiles to frozen bank accounts to maximize their leverage before anyone even thinks about sitting back down at the negotiating table. Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with Section 1, 100 Days of Escalation. Then Section 2, the Economic Choke Point. Section 3, the $24 billion deadlock. Section 4, the Lebanon complication. And finally, Section 5, the American domestic backlash. Let's get into it. Section 1, 100 Days of Escalation, focusing on the military front. The simple reality of the situation is this. You just cannot effectively negotiate a lasting peace agreement when missiles are actively flying through the air. It's honestly wild how fast that fragile April 8th ceasefire completely fractured into a vicious cycle of retaliation. Over the last 24 hours, U.S. Central Command struck critical Iranian coastal radar sites that are used to monitor shipping. And in direct response, Iran launched one-way attack drones toward U.S. allied bases in Kuwait and Bahrain, which culminated in a really deadly strike on Kuwait's international airport. Each move is essentially a calculated, violent test of the other's readiness. So the really interesting thing here is the massive contrast in military tactics. The United States is hyper-focused on enforcing a strict naval blockade and taking out the radar infrastructure that monitors those critical shipping lanes. Iran, on the flip side, is utilizing regional proxies to directly strike allied infrastructure, like airports. They're sending a very clear message that a violation on one front means retaliation on all fronts. Moving to Section 2, the Economic Choke Point, blockades and bottlenecks. Because these overseas military tactics, they don't stay in a vacuum. They translate directly into severe economic pain for everyday people all around the globe. Iran is really leaning on the critical Strait of Hormuz to drive up global inflation. A closed strait doesn't just mean you're paying surging gas prices at the pump. It acts like a domino effect. It triggers global fertilizer shortages in the agriculture sector, and it even severely disrupts the tech sector, which actually relies on the strait for the helium needed to manufacture microchips. Conversely, the U.S. naval blockade is economically choking the Iranian regime. And we're not just talking about hitting government bank accounts here. It is literally crushing the daily lives of everyday Iranian citizens. The economy is severely degraded, the country is facing internet blackouts, and daily survival is just becoming increasingly difficult under the immense weight of international sanctions. All right, Section 3, the $24 billion deadlock, taking us to the diplomatic front. Despite all those mounting economic and military pressures we just discussed, the diplomatic channels are at a complete, deeply frustrating standstill. And stuck right in the absolute middle of this chaos? Pakistani mediators. They are physically on the ground in Tehran right now, facing the immense challenge of navigating incredibly stubborn demands from both Washington and Iranian leadership. Their current goal is just finding a basic framework to get both sides to ease the maritime blockades so that formal talks can actually resume. But right now, the official positions are fundamentally incompatible. The U.S. is demanding a reopened Strait of Hormuz to allow the free flow of commerce alongside strict nuclear restrictions. Meanwhile, senior Iranian officials insist that unfreezing $24 billion in assets is an essential quote-unquote trust-building test that America has to pass first. So Iran wants the money released before they back down, and the U.S. absolutely refuses to surrender its biggest piece of leverage. Which brings us to Section 4, the Lebanon complication, a multi-front war. There's a massive external factor happening right next door that is acting as a total roadblock to these peace talks. You see, the situation in Lebanon is inextricably tied to the U.S.-Iran deadlock. Iran is demanding a ceasefire in Lebanon as a mandatory part of any broader deal with the U.S., but Israeli forces have recently conducted heavy strikes against Hezbollah in Beirut, leaving 800 to 900 Hezbollah fighters dead. With Hezbollah leadership totally rejecting recent ceasefire proposals, and Iran viewing this proxy battleground as part of the same overall conflict, this violence remains a huge barrier to peace. And finally, Section 5, the American domestic backlash, over on the domestic front. Let's zoom out a bit and look at how this overseas conflict and the resulting inflation is deeply reshaping Donald Trump's political standing back home. Negative
40 points. That is where approval ratings for this war currently sit among independent voters. It's a staggering drop, driven almost entirely by wartime fatigue and the heavy financial strain felt by Americans at the pump. When entire regions start seeing $5 gas that's resulting directly from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, public political patience just evaporates.
The public is absolutely exhausted. We're actually seeing a really rare moment of bipartisan consensus where 77% of all Americans just want the ceasefire to hold and negotiations to continue. Democrat, Republican, or independent, it doesn't matter. The public appetite for a prolonged, escalated conflict is incredibly low right now. And that massive shift in public approval, it fueled a direct bipartisan revolt in the House of Representatives, where they narrowly passed a war powers resolution, 215 to 208, to restrict the president's ability to wage war unilaterally. Notably, 4 Republicans actually defected: Thomas Massie, Brian Fitzpatrick, Tom Barrett, and Warren Davidson, specifically citing the severe economic impacts on their constituents, like those soaring gas prices and the expensive fertilizer that farmers can't even afford anymore. Backing up that move in Congress, data shows that 72% of independent voters actually support this check on executive power. They're strongly against presidents using military force without Congress's explicit approval. It really reflects a deep American restlessness with unilateral military action and a growing demand for a shared national commitment before engaging in any sort of prolonged overseas conflict. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. With both sides testing the absolute limits of their military might and completely refusing to budge, which immense geopolitical pressure is eventually going to force a resolution? Is it going to be the crushing economic weight of global inflation, the desperate need for $24 billion in frozen assets, or the undeniable pressure of American domestic restlessness? Keep a close eye on these leverage points, because they will ultimately define the outcome of this historic standoff. Thanks for joining me.